Welcome back. Now, it is inspired by her daughter Tumi and nieces and nephews. And the setting of the story is about three cousins who go on an adventure in Soweto and attempt to run the Spaza while their granny is away on a religious retreat. That's actor and TV personality Salamina Mosese's first children's book titled Disaster at Gogos Spaza. The book is targeted at children from the ages 6 to 9 and captures the beauty of the relationships that children have with each other. Now, the TV producer joins us on Zoom to tell us more about her book. Salamina, a very good morning to you. Warm welcome to Morning Live. I was reading about how you wrote this book and how it came about. For somebody who may not know, how did the idea of writing a children's book, Nochal, come about that compelled you to add author to your existing hats?
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning. I had always wanted to write a book. I didn't necessarily think children's book would be the first one, but I think a lot of parents, would be familiar with my story, purely because once you have children of your own, you really start to look for more and more reading material for them. And in my case, Dumelo, my firstborn, she's a voracious reader. So we were constantly at different bookshops. Eventually, I was just like, library card for you, madam. But in that adventure of always trying to look for different books, and as you get older, you also start to want her to read about more children who are either, remind her of herself or are in familiar settings, or just teach her about, a different subset of our different communities in the country. Disaster at Gogos Spaza really came out of, during lockdown, I wasn't able to film, I wasn't acting, I was also on maternity leave, the first lockdown, 2020. And I had just had our second born, Tato, and I was feeling really restless. And we were always online trying to look for books for Tumi. And I thought, I have time on my hands, a little bit of time, but I really want to try and scratch that itch that I've always had. And that's how I came to this book. And I read a lot of children's books during that time, just to familiarize myself with how we write for children. Because I didn't want to write as an adult, so to speak. I wanted it to feel young, to feel sweet, to feel naive. And it was really through different conversations with my daughter that we came to this book.
Mm-hmm. Without giving away too much, give us a brief synopsis of what is in the book for kids that are going to read it.
Growing up, holiday time for us was always time to visit Gogo.
Yeah.
And in so many ways, it's the same for Tumi. And she also gets to play with her cousins, So in the book, though fictitious in some instances, Dumelo visits her cousins who live with Gogo in Diepkloof, Soweto, and they usually have a saving challenge. Gogo is obviously the pillar of the community, having owned a Spaza shop, and she goes away for a choir competition. Gogo secretly wants to be a famous singer. And these kids decide, seeing as they're always in the Spaza shop with Gogo, that they will try and run it for themselves. After all, what could possibly go wrong? But of course, members of the community sort of know Gogo is away. So there are some, innocent walkabys who stumble upon this open Spaza shop, and it's really the adventure of these three children trying to figure out, without adult supervision, there is CC in the background, but she doesn't necessarily know what's going on until we are hitting crisis levels, and she sort of has to jump in and see how she rescues this whole situation. So it's very lighthearted. I didn't want it to come across as really preachy. I wanted just a reminder of the naughty things that we did as children, but really also to highlight the beauty of this community in Soweto, where everyone sort of knows each other, and we are all, supportive of this pillar in the community, which is Gogo and her little Spaza shop.
I mean, you've described a little bit on it, but what does Gogo's house look like? Is it a typical, household that most of us grew up in, Soweto?
It's exactly that. I also spent a few years living in Soweto with my paternal grandmother in Meadowlands, though. But I've always loved Diepkloof because my husband grew up in Diepkloof and the stories that he told me of his childhood. So it's really a combination of the two. But in my book, the Spaza shop is sort of on a cul-de-sac. And it's a street where, if you're walking towards the end of the street, chances are you're going to gather outside this Spaza. You're going to see these red brick houses. And that's really what I saw as well growing up. I think some of my favorite memories of growing up in Meadowlands was when my grandmother, who didn't allow us to play outside, by the way, but when she needed to go to the Spaza shop, we were allowed to venture out with her. And that was really when I got to fall in love with Soweto. I grew up in Limpopo. It's very rural, so it's a completely different world to the more urbanized Soweto. So I think I have a childhood love for the township, and that hasn't gone away.
What's been the response to the book?
Wow. It's been quite incredible. I will be honest, I have been very, very lovingly supported. I have had a few book launches. In fact, later today, I have a Native North Sea Foundation event where they have actually raised funds to have a group of children from the Ponelopele Foundation come from Limpopo to Pretoria to meet me so I can read to them, and they're gifting them my book. And there's a whole event around, International Literacy Day, which was earlier in September. So this is just an example of the incredible outpouring of support that I have seen. And I think my favorite thing has been receiving the comments from children, because I think anytime you venture into something new, it is the target market that you most care about. So It's been lovely having children go, Auntie Salamina, can you put this in the next book? And I'm like, that's actually a good idea. We should have a workshop.
Talk about it. I'm interested. What does the actual Tumi think about the book?
Tumi loves it. Tumi was one of the first people. In fact, she is the first person to have read the book in its entirety. So I would usually be writing at about 2, 1 in the morning when I've put them to bed, I've cleaned the house, I'm done with breastfeeding. So in the morning when she would wake up just before we start with homeschooling, this is obviously during lockdown, then she would ask me, so what did you write last night? And I'd have to read her a chapter. And I always say, I've said in a couple of the interviews that I've had that I felt a little bit like a comedian testing their material on the family. Because if I didn't get a giggle or a laugh or an outward chuckle from Tumi, then I'd be like, oh, I'm trying to write a funny book here for children. They kind of think, they need to think it's entertaining. So she really helped me to craft the story as well. And because she's such a big inspiration, and I've loved watching her grow up and seeing the world through her eyes, she is excited she says she's the most famous unknown child in South Africa. It's one way to look at it.
You know what? I want to talk about the lessons that came with working on this book for you personally. You're a new mom. There's homeschooling, you know what I mean? You can't get out of the house. The work that you are so passionate about has also stopped. When you reflect back, what lessons came with working on this particular project?
I think the biggest lesson for me has been, I think, as people in our creative industry, I think we're really hard on ourselves when we have to put out new stuff. And having done now 4 films as a producer and understanding the landscape of our country, which is so diverse, and our audiences are sort of scattered in their interests, etc. I think the biggest lesson has been just put out the stuff, guys. Our children need to be interacting with different media, with characters that look like themselves. You know, in this book, I actually sent the illustrator a picture of Tumi, and I said, please try and capture her essence. It doesn't have to look identical, but I think it's important that our children see themselves as cute and beautiful and naughty and mischievous. So as somebody who has put something out like this, it is so similar to the other films that my business partner and I have put out, in the sense that we are contributing to the media that our children are interacting with. So I think the advice I would give to anyone is stop putting it off. I put it off for way too long. And just put out the stuff, because, you know, South Africa has a voice, and South Africa has a product as a brand that we need to just put out there.
All right. Salamina Mosese, thank you so much. Congratulations on the book. Please tell Tumi we sent a special shout out for her. Now people know who she is.
Exactly. Now she's on Morning Live.
Please. Salamina, thank you so much for talking to us, speaking to us about her first published book, Disaster at Gogos Spaza, which was inspired by her daughter Tumi and her nieces and nephews. Quick ad break. We're back after this. Stay with us.